As a cashier at Little Caesars, the late-night shifts are usually uneventful, with the hum of the oven and the occasional ring of the doorbell breaking the monotony. It was just past 10 p.m. when he walked in, a disheveled man in his mid-50s, with a look of impatience etched on his face. He demanded a pepperoni pizza. I glanced at the timer. 10 minutes. Sir, it will be about 10 minutes for your pizza, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. His eyes darkened.
10 minutes? That's too long.
He grumbled but stepped outside, muttering something under his breath. I went back to my tasks, the uneasy feeling in my stomach growing. I had dealt with irate customers before, but there was something off about him. I shook off the feeling and focused on getting the pizzas out. Minutes later, the doorbell chimed again. He was back, and this time, he was not alone. In his hands was an AK-47, the cold metal glinting under the fluorescent lights. My heart stopped.
Where's my pizza?
He roared, pointing the weapon at me. The few customers in the store froze, their faces masks of terror. Please, sir, it's almost ready, I stammered, my mind racing. The pizza wasn't worth this. Nothing was worth this.
I want it now.
He swung the gun around, aiming it at my coworkers, at the customers, before settling back on me. A man in the back, holding his own pepperoni pizza, slowly stepped forward, his hands trembling.
Here, take mine,
he said, offering the box. The gunman snatched it from him, eyes wild. He backed toward the door, his weapon still trained on us.
Next time, don't make me wait.
He snarled before disappearing into the night. The silence that followed was suffocating. Slowly, everyone started to move, to breathe again. The police arrived shortly after, taking statements, but I was numb. The reality of what happened hit me like a freight train. I never saw the man again, but the image of him, the terror in that moment, has stayed with me. Every time the doorbell rings, I feel a pang of fear, a reminder of how quickly the ordinary can become a nightmare. The story involves a man named Charles Doty Jr. who, in November 2021, brought an AK-47 into a Little Caesars in Knoxville, Tennessee, after being told his pizza would take 10 minutes to be ready. He demanded the pizza immediately and even pointed the weapon at employees. Another customer eventually gave him a pizza to defuse the situation. Doty was charged and has since pleaded guilty to 4 counts of aggravated assault, with his sentencing scheduled for later this year.
One man allegedly went too far when he was told his Little Caesars pizza was not hot and ready, pulling an AK-47 on employees and demanding his food ASAP. Customer, identified by police as 53-year-old Charles Doty Jr., reportedly became upset when he was told he would have to wait 10 minutes for a pepperoni pizza. Morrell says he left the store, went to his car, and came back with the weapon.
Disbelief.
It was a rainy Thursday evening, the kind of night where the sky seemed to press down on the world, and the streets were slick with a constant drizzle. I had just finished a grueling day at work and was craving the comfort of a Little Caesars pizza. I swung by the familiar location, expecting the usual quick in-and-out transaction. As I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed only one other car, a beat-up, old sedan that looked like it had seen better days. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed, casting a harsh glow on the empty tables. I shrugged off the eerie feeling and walked in, the bell above the door chiming to announce my arrival. Behind the counter stood a man I hadn't seen before. He was large, very large, with a stained apron barely covering his ample girth. His face was sweaty, and his eyes seemed to glisten in the artificial light. Despite his imposing appearance, he greeted me with a surprisingly friendly smile.
Evening. What can I get for you?
His voice was deep, but there was a strange, almost desperate eagerness to it. Just a large pepperoni, please, I replied, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling gnawing at my stomach. As he prepared my pizza, I couldn't help but notice how methodical he was. Each motion was precise, almost ritualistic. The way he sprinkled the cheese and placed the pepperoni slices seemed oddly deliberate. There was an unsettling silence, broken only by the hum of the ovens and the rhythmic tap of the man's movements. I tried to make small talk to ease the tension. "So, been working here long?" He glanced up, his eyes meeting mine for a brief moment before returning to the pizza.
A few months. Just trying to get by, you know?
I nodded, though I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story. Something about him seemed off, like he was hiding something. But I dismissed my suspicions as paranoia brought on by the weather and my own fatigue. Once the pizza was ready, he handed it to me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I paid and left, the bell chiming again as I exited. The rain had picked up, so I hurried to my car, eager to get home and relax. But as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw the man standing at the window, watching me leave. Back home, I settled in front of the TV with my pizza, trying to unwind. As I bit into the first slice, a strange taste hit my tongue. It was metallic and wrong. I spit it out and inspected the slice, finding something that looked disturbingly like a fragment of bone. My stomach churned. I tossed the pizza aside and decided to call the police. Something wasn't right, and I needed answers. The officers arrived quickly and took the pizza as evidence, promising to investigate further. The next day, I received a call from the detective assigned to the case. His voice was grim.
"Sir, we need you to come down to the station. There's something you need to see."
At the station, the detective led me to a room where a series of photographs were laid out on a table. They showed the inside of the Little Caesars kitchen, and what they revealed made my blood run cold. There were human remains, limbs, organs, and bones, hidden among the kitchen equipment. The man from the night before had been using human flesh as toppings for the pizzas. The detective explained that the man, whose name was Jerry, had been a drifter with a history of mental illness. He had managed to secure the job at Little Caesars a few months ago, and since then, several people had gone missing in the area. It was only by chance that I had stumbled upon his horrifying secret. The police found evidence of his gruesome activities in the basement of the building, where he had been storing and processing the bodies. The victims had been customers, lured in by the promise of a quick meal, only to become ingredients in Jerry's twisted culinary creations. I was horrified, unable to comprehend how close I had come to becoming one of his victims. The thought of having eaten even a single bite of that pizza made me sick to my core. Jerry was arrested and charged with multiple counts of murder, but the damage he had done would haunt me forever. Since that night, I've been unable to step foot in a pizza place. The simple pleasure of a hot slice has been tainted by the memory of that rainy Thursday and the man behind the counter. The world seemed a much darker place, where even the most mundane routines could hide unspeakable horrors.
The very first night of my job as a pizza delivery guy turned out to be something that you would only expect to happen in movies. The incident gave me sleepless nights, and I remember suffering from sleep paralysis thereafter. It was in February. We were nearing our closing time. The other delivery guy who would normally stay until closing time had left early that day for whatever reason. I remember him mentioning some personal, unavoidable problem. All of a sudden, the phone on the counter rang. It was past midnight, and we didn't think it was strange for someone to call at this hour for pizza, probably midnight cravings. But then it hit me. I was going to be the one to deliver it. The manager had received the call and gave me the address the caller had mentioned. I looked back at him with a frustrated look and he shrugged. I had no choice. The manager said I better be quick as he would have to wait till I came back. The chef handed the pizza to me with a frown, and I could clearly read the annoyance on his face. I didn't recognize the place and the address at first, but I was accustomed to delivering to addresses I had not heard of before. This particular address was difficult to find. After a lot of hassle, I found the house at the town outskirts. It was the last house in a row of houses opposite a long stretch of thicket. Forests have often freaked me out, so I decided to make it quick and get back as soon as possible. When I neared the house, I observed the front door to be ajar. Strange. I rang the doorbell repeatedly, but no one answered. Suddenly, a gust of wind threw open the front door even more, and I was able to make out the interiors of the drawing room. Brightly lit with all the lights on and completely empty. I entered anyway and called out for someone. No sound but a low, pleasant music playing from the cassette player on the cabinet beside me. It was so eerily silent with that music in the background that I started freaking out. I could hear my own breathing. Only then, from behind the door in the far corner, did I hear a sound. I headed towards that room. Shouldn't have. When I opened the door, I was expecting the caller, but I got the nightmare of my life. It was a person, all right, but dead. Almost. The corpse was lying on the bed in a pool of blood. Its abdomen was tore open, and the eyes directly looking at me. I wanted to throw up. In a split second, I was out of the house, not caring about who it was, or who did that, or the cold pizza in the box. I ran for my life, just before pausing in horror at a face staring from behind the door of the same room where I had just been. It was a man, showing only his head from behind the door, with a sickening smile on its face. I had been in the same room with that man for a minute or so. This was enough for me. I stepped on the gas and sped to my shop, throwing the pizza at my clueless manager, and from there to my home, where I laid for 4 days with a high fever. I quit my job thereafter. But what struck me afterwards was that no other houses except that cursed home had their lights on. It was like all of them were abandoned. I shrugged off that feeling at the time, but now as I come to think of that, I shudder. What was that place?